Welcome at another CEO Wisdom podcast today with Rob Archers. He is president at Robert Archers International, CEO at Coastal Sea Products International, president at Idea Park, Ramp Up Accelerator Advisor, and board of directors at BC Seafood Festival, which is amazing. We're going to talk about international trade today, so it's going to be fun because that's what I studied at university. I mean, I dropped out, but I was always an international trades guy. That's how I started my career, importing stuff from China, selling it in Canada. In Rob's case, we're also going to talk about Canada-Mexico relationships in terms of trade, the evolution of NAFTA, how Mexico started how US started exporting more to it actually imported more from Mexico than China recently. We're going to check out these figures and these numbers. It was in the multiple of billions, obviously. It's going to be a fun one. This podcast is brought to you by podpar.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to podcast or find your next sponsor, we can help you do that. Podcasts are amazing to learn, meet new people like Rob, brainstorm with them, pick their brain for free, and grow your network, basically. You can grow your network as well because you'll get a bunch of leads and clients from these podcasts. I am specialized in monetizing podcasts. So podpar.com for my podcasting agency. Rob, welcome to the pod. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and about your companies?
Thanks, Charles. I'm Rob Arthurs. As Charles said, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been self-employed my whole life. Right out of high school, I started an oil field trucking company in Alberta. From there, I started a janitorial maid service business, ended up in Vancouver, where I started a clothing company, which grew from $1 to $5 million in 3 years. I sold that company in 2000 and went on full-time business consulting and coaching, where the Canadian government took me on a speaking tour across Canada, United States, and Japan, speaking on entrepreneurship. And that spun a career for me in business coaching and consulting. I was headhunted by the 2010 Olympic Games in 2005 to help with the 2010 Olympic Games and procurement, to making sure that the organizers had everything they needed from Canada that they were looking for. And I became a specialist in the food, because our games was the first time ever in the history of Olympics that if Charles won a gold medal, we test Charles' blood, we find a hormone in his blood, he can't blame it on the food, because we were the first Olympics ever to set aside food from that games, every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner that was served, and snacks, so that we could go back and prove that the hormones that are in his blood didn't come from the food. So very interesting. And then after that, I stayed and developed an international trade program for the province of BC. So I'm very well versed in the clothing industry, which took me into international trade in a big way. And then further with the government, where I helped food entrepreneurs and agri-tech entrepreneurs export their products around the world. So I've got a lot of experience in the trade industry.
I see that with New Zealand as well. So what are you up to nowadays? How do you split your time?
Charles, I own 4 companies still, and I have partners in 3 of them. So I have great partners who take their share of work, and the workload is spread amongst our partners. Robert Arthurs International, of course, is a solopreneur, where I do everything myself. I bring my experience. It's hard to find other people to work with that have a vast experience of my stuff. But I do contract work for the government of Netherlands, the government of New Zealand. I hope to be doing government work with the government of Mexico. We've been playing a little dance about how I can work with their entrepreneurs, in particular in agri-tech, which is technology that moved from life sciences or artificial intelligence into the agricultural field. So both countries are doing a lot of things in agri-tech, and we're trying to share collaboration with each country. So my time is split on amongst other things, and I still do a lot of business coaching and consulting for many companies that are trying to get into the Canadian marketplace and take advantage of our 53 trade agreements that Canada has.
Right. And tell me, like, which country / trade is the most exciting to you? Is it Canada, Mexico nowadays?
Mexico has become the new China. It is absolutely exploding in Mexico and what's happening. There's so much activity, and not just with Canadian companies, but other countries, especially Asian countries, that are now trying to get away from the supply chain issues. You know, they're having a hard time getting a container to get to export their products out of Asia, then get onto a ship, then wait to get unloaded. So we're talking weeks, where if they went into Mexico, like Guadalajara area, which is that technology area, also the agricultural breadbasket for Mexico, you can get stuff on a rail car to Vancouver in 9 days. That just is a game changer. So you look at not only Canadian companies, but actually companies that were headquartered in China now moving to Mexico for supply chain, solving supply chain issues.
And why is it exploding in Mexico? Is it because of the young population here? Is it because they're hard workers? Is it because of the new government? What macro trends are shaping this current landscape?
In my field, Charles, I'll speak about the agri-tech side. The technology side, we're talking about a highly skilled worker, much more educated than they were in the past. We're not talking the Mexican people used to be looked as farm workers. These are technology people that have been gone to good universities, good schools, continuing to learn. And on top of it, you add that hardworking ethic to that education, and man, it's easy to see why people are coming there in droves.
What parts of Mexico, because you're going to Guadalajara pretty soon, that would be like the tech hub of Mexico. What other parts are we seeing that it's growing exponentially? Would that be Monterrey or Ciudad de Mexico también?
Well, Monterrey for sure. Big. I mean, Monterrey was the financial capital, and that's what it was known for. But there's so much other stuff coming out of Monterrey now. Puebla for another area for agriculture. You know that Mexico always had great coffee from the Chiapas area. Those are areas that are growing as well. So we're just seeing explosion, and Mexico has done a really good job in diversifying. Hey, we're great for tourism, but we're also good for business. And I like the idea of where I'm talking about going to Puerto Vallarta for 3 months, but on the backside is a cosmopolitan city of Guadalajara, where there's also business being done. So I like how the country has got areas to do business, but also areas to relax and to take advantage of the opportunities, much like yourself, headquartered in Mexico.
Right. And in terms of, doing back and forth with some of your clients and the government, is it always that way? Is it always that hard to get new deals? Like, how do you get these new clients at your doorstep?
You know what? So Charles, and I'll go back to one of the things I mentioned. Canada has 53 trade agreements as opposed to United States 20 something. So we're the only G7 nation that has a free trade agreement with the EU. So if you want to partner and export a product, you might bring up an unfinished product from Mexico, finish it in Canada, and then you qualify for free trade for Europe. And it's the same thing with other countries now saying, hey, well, hang on, Canada is part of the CTPP trade agreement with Asia, Vietnam, Malaysia, and all these other countries. Maybe we can finish our EU product in Canada, and then we can export it to the trade nations of Japan, Vietnam, that are all part of that trade. So there's this piggybacking we're finding that our people are now starting to win, and they're looking for consultants like myself. So I'm very active in social media. As you see, my LinkedIn's about 19,000. So I've got great contacts globally of people that know me as a guy that traveled to trade shows around the world. And I worked with many of these governments while I was with the government. So I've got a good trade relationship up there, and that's how people find me, mostly through LinkedIn.
Okay, so LinkedIn outreach, and you send them a message. What does that message says exactly? What's the beginning of your funnel, and what's your offer to them?
So a lot of my stuff, and I try not to, Charles, not to get into that sales funnel, especially on LinkedIn, but I will put out a message or excuse me, I'll put out something about trade that I might have found globally about things that are affecting trade. So if there's something that talks about, like you mentioned, the article that came out about Mexico now replacing China as the first largest partner of trading for the United States, that was big news. And so I grabbed that article, posted it, reposted it, and reshared it on my LinkedIn. And I had several hundred, if not several thousand people liking the post and starting to read it. So that builds credibility for me about I'm in the trade. And then I'll do something else, or I'll write a comment or my comment regarding that article. So I try to contribute where I can, and that usually will create some sort of a conversation with somebody else. So before you and I got on this call this morning, I'm now working with a call from somebody that's read one of my articles from Brazil about doing some exporting of some products in agriculture from Brazil. So we start to have these conversations when people start to know that I have this active network.
Import, export, is that like, or could you, for example, start some outreach campaigns targeting these countries and asking them if they've thought of exporting or if they want to scale their exports? And if so, which one would be the best campaign? Should it be to Canadian business owner telling them to import more stuff in Mexico and do the vice versa in Mexico? What do you think about that strategy?
You know what, Charles, that's something I've always wanted to do, is to do that outreach, deliberate outreach in those countries about how to expand because they might not have thought about piggybacking on free trade agreements, but this is what we do with your free trade agreement, with your stuff going on in Mexico. You can do stuff in Canada and finish off your product because it's duty free. So yes to both things. And Canadians understanding, listen, I know, rather than looking at the Asia as part of your dynamics for your supply chain, why don't you look at Mexico and explore there? So there's things that I'm trying to do as a consultant and a business coach to my clients, is to direct them. The only thing that's missing from the Mexico piece is, unlike the Asian countries like Taiwan, I get a trade publication about things and products and electronics that they have. They don't seem to have that, excuse me, in Mexico. I don't seem to have a trade publication of, here's what they can do. You want to build a computer, here's companies that can do that. So that's the one thing that's missing as Mexico is growing. But I can tell you, talking to my Mexican counterparts, that they are working on that trade publication. But absolutely.
Yeah, I can tell you there's opportunities in both countries. For example, maple syrup in Mexico is probably 2 or 3 times as expensive as in Canada, that delicious liquid. So there would be a market for that. I know there's associations, so we need to be careful with that, right? The AK cartels of maple syrups in
yes,
in Canada, unfortunately, with the barrel scandal and all of that. But that would be an example, and vice versa. When I go in Canada and enter a Latino store with my wife that is Mexican, it's the bottle of salsa Valentina that we buy there is 5 times as expensive as in Mexico. So how about the little competition there? How about taking a little risk with your company, start exporting and seeing some massive returns? I think that's what entrepreneurship is about, right? It's about experimenting 100 times and maybe having 3 victories. And if you don't ever experiment, you're gonna stagnate. And if you stagnate, your business is dying, and you're gonna die too, along with the business, or go back to a 9-to-5 job. So yeah, you and I can talk about these campaigns, because I'm building some right now as we speak, and they're quite successful. Now, with your business, you offer various services. What's the price of these services, and why should people pick you instead of another international expansion coach?
So I charge $180 an hour Canadian, Charles, and that's a discounted rate. And I can work with a client. Sometimes I work with clients on a monthly basis. So if I'm like a on-call international consultant. So if they want me as part of their team, I've gone to many meetings with my clients in a bank meeting where I'm there as their international consultant. And the banks like that, as I'm part of that advisory team. So they know that the owner, who knows nothing about trade, doesn't have to know about trade, because he's got a trade expert with him. So I work with a lot of clients on that as a fractional sort of international trade consultant. And I do a lot of that stuff. So I have many different ways I can work with different clients. And if it's just a one-time deal, I had a client a couple of months ago that wanted me on a call for, they're a plant-based protein company that wanted me on a call with them to talk to the Costco of Japan. So I acted as on their behalf as the guy that's worked with Costco Japan before in these conversations and led the whole conversation about trade and what they were looking for.
It's quite exciting. Yeah.
Mhm.
And for these companies, for how long do they contract you most of the time? Is it for a block of 40 hours? And is it, oh, I need Rob for 6 months and after we're done? Or is it like a forever deal?
You know what, Charles? I'm a man of the philosophy of the old adage of don't teach a man to fish. I don't want a client forever. I've had some clients with me for 3 or 4 years that are realtors that love the comfort of me being there as their business coach and in their corner. But it gets boring for me. I like a change of pace, working with different clients, working with different challenges. So sometimes I'll be with a client for a month, but I recommend if they're working with me to work with me for 3 months. And that way they get to really start to see results. We can start to build a strategy around trade. Now, I went to talk to you about international trade, but one thing that we should understand, Charles, is as Mexico, Canada, United States are entering trade agreements, those 53 trade agreements that Canada has signed, that's great for the exporters, but also understand that those 53 countries want access to the Canadian market as well. Just like Mexico wants their salsa sauces in Canada and Loblaws. So you have to be very careful if you're a Canadian entrepreneur who says, I don't want to export. Well, that's great. You don't have to export, but be prepared. Those 53 countries that we signed a trade agreement want to be on a shelf in Loblaws beside your product, and they probably have better health certifications than you do. They probably got every certification under the moon to show that their product's safe and reliable and not going to get anybody sick. And that for retailers, that's what they're looking for. So you have to have a strategy for that in place and saying, hey, I don't have a strategy for exporting, but I got a strategy for keeping my marketplace and gaining that market. So it's a game that people have got to play and understand in their marketplace about trade. It could be a two-way, it could be a double-edged sword.
Right. Yeah, it can be. For your company, what are your top 3 goals for the rest of this year? 3 months remaining there.
Well, my top 3 goals right now is I have my supplement company called Celebritas Health Products. It's a natural medicine company. So I'm working with many companies from around the world in unique formulas that have been used for centuries. So we now look at ancient India, ancient Greece, parts of the Mayan culture, the Incas. What were they using to treat people with certain diseases or skin diseases? And then I look for the product and I look for the science. So I am trying to scale that company substantially and grow that company. So that's my main focus right now, is growing Celebritas Health Products and looking for unique formulas or remedies from around the world that I can add to my marketplace.
My first company was a nootropic company approved by Health Canada and backed by science. We did some tests in the lab, was neuroprotective and so forth. Why did you decide to launch that company, and what does your regimen looks like to keep your brain and body healthy?
So I launched that company because as part of my job with the BC government, was to lead vitamin companies around the world to different food shows. So I had a chance to tour most factories in British Columbia. I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly in this business. My wife and I started a gummy bear vitamin line in 2017. And the company that was manufacturing for me, I helped them land a very large deal with Alibaba. And Alibaba turned around to them and said, we cannot let you white label for anybody else anymore. So they cut me off. And I said, okay, that's fine. But when I leave the government in 1 year from now, I'm going to go into the adult vitamin business. I'm going to go to Ayurvedic medicine. I'm going to grab medicines from around the world that have been used. My wife's Chinese, so I look at ancient formulas been used by the Chinese medicine, like dandelion, sea buck, thorn, many of these different products, and put it in there. So I use those products, and we look for those products. But my regimen every day, Charles, is my wife is a yoga instructor and a dance instructor. That's what she did in China. So she worked in the health field. But we do yoga every day. We do a bit of meditation. We get up early, usually about 5:30. By 8 o'clock, I'm done pretty much everything. I've done my meditation, my yoga, and a lot of times, and then in the afternoon, I'll park my time from about 12 o'clock or 12:30 till about 1:30 and go for a walk, and then come back and do some more work. So I chunk my time. Nutrition's very important for me to keep going. I take a lot of different supplements, but I'm trying to take everything. I'm trying to build out my own supplements, and right now I'm working on an unbelievable mushroom line, and people that have not been taking mushrooms need to pay attention to mushroom. It is a gift from nature of one of the best products that's been out there and ignored highly.
Very cool routine that you have there, and glad to see that you take care of yourself and that supplement company. Let's see also, and because if I'd have to restart my nootropic company, I'd focus on Amazon, and I'd focus on getting into stores and retail. So yeah, let's see if I can help on that front. Until then, where can people find out more about you, Rob?
I would go to my LinkedIn profile, which is linkedin.com/Robert Arthurs. That's probably the best place to follow me and my companies. I'd love to get in touch. I love networking. I run several networking. So if anybody's on the call that happens to be in Vancouver, we have a networking breakfast every Wednesday morning in West Vancouver. We have a monthly event on a yacht in downtown Vancouver that you're all invited to. The next one's October 14th. And we have many visiting entrepreneurs who don't live in Vancouver, but are here visiting as entrepreneurs doing business. And if you reach out to me, I'll make sure you got an invite to the yacht and come and meet about another 150 different entrepreneurs.
I'm Charles Cormier, host of founder wisdompodcast.com. That was Rob Archer.